Greetings, Hancock Health leaders and LEM users. My name is Derek Mousy, and this is part one of a two-part series to explain the linkage grid. So here is the agenda for this series. In part one, which will be 7 to 8 minutes, we'll explain the linkage grid, providing an example, and then end that session by discussing the accountability and the ways that you'll be held accountable for completing the items on the linkage grid. And then in session 2, we'll actually take you into the LEM and the validation matrix and explain how you'll update your linkage grid monthly prior to your monthly meeting. So as mentioned, in this video, we'll only cover part 1 in explaining the linkage grid. So part 1. So the linkage grid explained. Per the definition below, you can see that Leadership Development Institutes or LDIs provide a dependable framework to educate leaders and enhance the skills they need to drive organizational outcomes and improve their own individual leadership performance. So as you know, LDIs occur once per quarter, and it's a lot of material. It's a lot of new material and a lot of new learning. So you can think of that LDI as kind of a mountain of material for reference in the diagram above. And the linkage grid really is the bridge between LDIs that helps hardwire that material into our organization. So per the definition, the linkage grid focuses on the 90-day period between sessions to ensure that key learnings, tools, tips, and best practices from the LDI are standardized and hardwired into the organization, really preventing them from falling off and helping us hardwire those into our organization to better affect outcomes. So a little bit more about the linkage grid. It utilizes the Learn, Do, Teach model. The LDIs provide the framework for attendees to learn new material, tools, tips, and best practices to enhance your skills. Often, attendees have the opportunity to learn or to practice, or do these new techniques during the LDI. So then after the LDI, the linkage grid then provides the LDIs with what we could call a hardwiring checklist for these new learnings, which consists of several items that provide more practice for the individual as well as resources that you should be using to teach your associates under your supervision that were not able to attend the LDI. So once again, for sake of reference, the linkage grid serves as that gap, that bridge to fill the gap between the learnings at the LDI to be sure that what we're spending our time on is really getting driven into our organization in order to improve outcomes. So a linkage grid example, we'll take you back to the first LDI of 2016, the kickoff. As you'll remember, Mark Noon was our speaker. And here's the agenda for the day. And what I really want to highlight is that our key content for that day was all around AIDIT plus the promise. So that was our learn. We spent a good majority of the morning session hearing from Mark Noon, as well as participating in activities. And then in the afternoon, we also practiced AIDIT as well. So then the linkage grid, to follow up from that day for that 90-day gap in between, you can see this list here, but strictly with regard to AIDIT, you can see that attendees are required to watch the student-aided educational video to provide some more learning, collect, review, and discuss personal aidits from each member of their team doing, and then validating members in AIDIT and providing feedback on how well they're doing AIDIT and where they can improve teaching. So then to follow up just a little bit more kind of about the accountability of the linkage grid and ensuring those learnings are hardwired. As most of you will know, and we'll explain in part 2 of this video, it'll be something that we include in the validation matrix and that you're required to update monthly prior to your monthly meeting with your supervisor. The second way that we'll use to make sure that we're hardwiring these initiatives is by getting feedback via a linkage grid survey prior to the next LDI. So from this survey, we'll kind of ask about the status and the progress that you've made via the linkage grid from the last LDI, and we'll also ask if there's any areas that could use retraining. And from there, as you can see, this is the agenda for the follow-up LDI. So at the end of that linkage grid, we build in a session called a linkage grid review, which you'll see circled in green. So during this time, we'll revisit areas that were taught in the prior LDI in a different way or in a more scoped down fashion to ensure that we're meeting the needs based on that survey. So once again, learning. And then from there, we'll probably provide you with a couple more opportunities to do and teach your associates as well. So this concludes session one of the Linkage Grid Explained. Please come back for session 2, and we'll talk about how exactly you will go about updating your linkage grid in the validation matrix in LEM. Thank you.